Welcome back to the Digital Town Crier, where we have real conversations about mental health, healing, and everyday life. I'm your host, Lola, and today we're diving into something so many people experience but don't always understand: anxiety. This is episode 2 of our mental health series, When Worry Takes Over. Joining me again is therapist Gladys Wilson. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lola. I'm so glad we always continue to have these topics that are so important to our community. I'm glad that we're talking about anxiety because so many people are silently struggling with it every single day.
People throw the word anxiety around a lot. Someone says, I'm anxious about my test, or I have anxiety before interviews. But what's the difference between normal stress and an anxiety disorder?
So, that is a really good question, Lola. Anxiety itself is a normal human emotion. Everyone worries sometimes, but anxiety can become a disorder when the fear, worry, or nervousness becomes excessive, persistent, and begins to interfere with the person's everyday life. So, we're talking about constant overthinking, trouble sleeping, racing thoughts, avoiding situations, physical symptoms, and feeling like your mind never shuts off. It's not simply being dramatic or thinking too much. Anxiety disorder can affect relationships, work, school, parenting, and even physical health.
So, Gladys, one term people hear often is generalized anxiety disorder. What exactly is that?
Generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD, is when someone is experiencing chronic worry about multiple areas of life. So, their finances, their health, their family, their work, their safety, even when there's not a clear reason for them to worry. The mind stays in the what if mode. And so, what if something goes wrong? What if I fail? What if something bad happens to my children? What if people are upset with me? So, people with GAD often struggle to relax because their brain feels like it is always on, it's always staying alert.
Almost like the mind is constantly preparing for danger.
Exactly. So, the nervous system stays activated, and over time, that can become emotionally and physically exhausting.
One of the scariest experiences people describe is panic attacks. Some people actually think they're dying.
So, yes, panic attacks can feel incredibly intense. During a panic attack, the body goes through a flight or fight mode. People experience rapid heartbeat, chest pain, dizziness, sweating, shaking, shortness of breath, that feeling of numbness, feeling detached from reality. And some people even end up in the emergency room believing that they're having a heart attack.
That sounds terrifying.
Yes, it can very well be. And afterwards, people may become fearful of having another panic attack, which then leads to avoiding places, driving, avoiding crowds or situations that feel like they're trapped, and thus begins the vicious cycle.
Another form of anxiety people misunderstand is social anxiety. People often call someone shy, but it can be much deeper than that.
Absolutely. So, social anxiety is not simply being quiet or introverted, it is an intense fear of being judged, embarrassed, rejected, or criticized in social situations. Someone with social anxiety may replay conversations in their head hours after, just wondering different things in their mind, like, did I sound stupid? Were they judging me? Did I say the wrong thing? Some people avoid public speaking, social gatherings, dating, eating in public, or even answering the phone. So I'll interject a really quick story here. So I once worked with, well, I've worked with several people that struggle with that, making phone calls, and it's really interesting when you think about it because we typically, like, we'll pick up the phone and call to make our appointments, or we'll pick up the phone to to talk to our friends and family and things like that. So it's something that you may be thinking, like picking up the phone and making a phone call can be anxiety inducing. And for some people, it actually can be. And so I have worked with people where somebody else has to call and make their appointments and things like that. And so in those cases, we did graded exposure, which is one of the therapeutic methods that's used with people with anxiety. And depending on how intense the anxiety is, we do the graded exposure obviously over time, and we do it, gently with compassion to get the person to their goal of being able to do the thing that causes them the actual panic. And once they get to that point where they can make that phone call on their own, they can go into a social situation and speak their mind. They can do that presentation at work, whatever it is. It is so beautiful to see the light, to see them kind of glowing because they are so proud of themselves and doing this thing. And one of the heartbreaking things about this is the person understands that this isn't normal. They understand that they are an adult, they're supposed to do these things, and sometimes they can be very cruel to themselves. And so just recently I said it, and thus begins the vicious cycle. And the vicious cycle is knowing you're supposed to do something, you know anticipating the panic, not doing the thing, feeling bad because you're supposed to, and then it comes back around where okay, I really have to do this important thing, and then the cycle just continues. And then sometimes, or a lot of the time, the anxiety just continues to build and build and build until it really just cripples the person, and the person can't do anything, moving forward. And so if that sounds like you, or it sounds like somebody that reach out to a therapist. It is workable. The person can, you or the person can come to a point where they're not, having that crippling anxiety, where doing the thing they fear the most can become like an everyday task. They don't have to think about it anymore. But it does take time to get there. It takes that loving compassion, and in therapy with a therapist, that beautiful work can begin, and it is something that is accomplishable, it is achievable. So don't go too long without reaching out to a therapist to help you in those cases, or to help your loved one.
Gladys, that warmth and compassion you speak of is what we all need. The therapy space does offer a place for healing. That brings me to this point. I think people are surprised by how physical anxiety can be.
Yes, and anxiety affects the entire body, not just the mind. So people can experience headaches, muscle tension, stomach problems, fatigue, trouble sleeping, increased heart rate, nausea, and restlessness. Sometimes people think that something is medically wrong with their body, and it is actually responding to the chronic stress and that anxiety brings along with it. It's why mental health and physical health are deeply connected.
I know we love to talk about breaking the stigma that prevents people from seeking mental health care. So, talk a little bit about our favorite celebrities who have been open about their own struggles.
Yes, Lola, we love it when we can point to people that have a huge platform who open up and talk about their struggles with mental health. Let's start with Emma Stone. So she has openly talked about experiencing debilitating panic attacks since childhood, and she uses therapy as a lifelong coping tool. So that's one thing that brings to mind. Like, sometimes um, I've worked with clients who've been in therapy for, years with me, and it doesn't always look like that one session a week. Sometimes it can be every 2 weeks, sometimes it can be once a month. That kind of once a month, we just kind of check in, and we continue to do those little check ins. And then the person can, come back and say, okay, I think it's time to do that once a week, or bi-weekly, or I have something that I need to share and work through, and things like that. So therapy can look like anything that'll be helpful for you. So don't be afraid to go to therapy because you think it'll be too time consuming or take a long time. That's something that you can discuss with your therapist. Ryan Reynolds, oh my goodness, yes, one of our other favorites. He has suffered with anxiety for most of his career, and he's openly talked about it. He at times rely on staying in character during the moment so that he can kind of get over his nerves and get through the situation. As I'm talking about Ryan Reynolds, I think we need another rerun of Deadpool because I think we've done that a lot, but we might need another one.
Sign me up.
That is absolutely done. So let's continue. So Selena Gomez is another celebrity who has talked about actually having to step away from the public space in order to manage her panic attacks that she had and depression. There's Pedro Pascal, the one we all love. He uses his signature red carpet pose, standing with his hand pressed tightly against his torso as a healthy way of reminding people that sometimes a person can be voted the sexiest man, or everybody can love and adore him, but he is still human and he deals with these things. So he uses it as a physical hack to ground himself and to cope with anxiety. Then there's Adele, who has struggled with severe stage fright and panic attacks, and she, famously toured with her therapist to manage her stress. And so, Adele came onto the stage, and she came into the world with that beautiful voice, and she's letting us know that she is still human and she needs to be able to take care of herself, even though her gift is for singing and being on the stage. She still sometimes struggles with that anxiety. And touring with her therapist, you know what? I absolutely love that idea because, sometimes we do need that person that we can reach out to, and it doesn't take such a long time to get an appointment, or, different things like that. There's Kim Kardashian, and she has been vocal like about experiencing anxiety and panic attacks, particularly after like high stress situations where she has to go to events and do various different things. She manages it with therapy and mindfulness. There's Joanne Hill, who experiences anxiety and panic attack that's triggered by the promotional tours that she has to do. There's Kristen Bell, who has spoken candidly about her lifelong struggles with anxiety and depression and how she kind of cycles between the two. And so even if you feel like I'm having panic attacks around this particular thing, but you know that it's your gift, it doesn't mean that you have to stop doing it. It means that therapy is definitely going to help you to be able to manage that anxiety so that you can fulfill your passions and your gifts. And these celebrities and everything that they're telling us is a beautiful example of that.
Before we close, what would you like listeners to remember?
So, first, know that anxiety is very treatable and you're not weak, broken, or failing. Some of the coping skills that help is deep breathing exercises, grounding techniques, kind of like the way Pedro Pascal puts his hands on his torso, limiting overstimulation and stress, journaling, physical movement and exercise, healthy sleeping habits. So getting those nighttime, routines going, challenging anxious thoughts, practicing mindfulness, and the biggest one of all, going to therapy so that you can learn all of these different things and you can have somebody that's sitting across from you that has that compassionate tone.
Thank you so much, Gladys, for this important conversation. And thank you to everyone listening to the Digital Town Crier. If today's episode helped you, share it with someone who may need encouragement. Join us next time as we continue exploring mental health, healing, and hope together. Thank you all for being faithful listeners of the Digital Town Crier. If you haven't already, please do us a favor and like and subscribe. Most of all, we want to hear from you, so leave a comment, This segment was for educational purposes only.